Okay, our 1-3 quiz is going to cover just two topics. We have distance, so we can use the distance formula for that, or we can, my approach is going to be more leaning on Pythagorean theorem and our understanding of that, but it also fits the distance formula mold, and then midpoints, which I think is even easier. So let's take a look at some of the examples that we have in the review. You should have a copy of this in Schoology. If you want to print a copy or work electronically, you can use the draw feature in Word to just write on your notes and follow along here. So I'm going to use the number line here to find each measure, and I really want to lean on this sense of the number line when we get to these problems down here as well. So let's look at VW first. What's the distance from V to W on a number line? So V lives here at 1 and W is here at 5. So we can literally just count, or we can subtract, 5 minus 1, or what's the distance from a point at 1 to a point at 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 minus 1 also is 4. Okay, now we'll go from T to V. Let's see where that takes us. So at T, we're here at negative 4. And then to get to V, which is at 1, how far is that? So again, this is always going to be positive. We could take the absolute value of negative 1 minus, or negative 4 minus 1, which would be negative 5. But that distance would be 5. It always has to be a positive value. Or we can just count. We can see how long of a distance is it from negative 4 to positive 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can see that that distance is 5. Okay, so let's try the next two on your own, and we'll put those answers in our Edpuzzle. All right, so for the first one, what's the distance from S to T, or the length of ST? And then also, what's the length of SV? Let's try those on our own and put the answers in our Edpuzzle. Okay, so for S to T, hopefully we saw that S lives here at negative 7, and T is at negative 4, so that's just a distance of 3. From negative 7 to negative 4, we should have said that that was a distance of 3. And then we have from S to V. So S is still here at negative 7, but this time we have to go to 1. So just to get from negative 7 to 0, that's going to be 7. And one more, we should have said that that was a distance of 8. Okay, so hopefully we got those two right. Okay, now here's where we're really going to see the Pythagorean theorem in effect. We have our distance from M to Z. So the first thing that would be most helpful here is to look at what those coordinates actually are. The coordinates of Z are 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the coordinates of Z are 3, 3. It's going to be helpful to be able to visualize that. And you're going to see when we get down to the bottom here, that's all we're going to have. And then for the coordinates of M, we're at negative 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 1. So negative 4, negative 1. So you're going to notice I'm going to do the exact same thing I did up above, except we're going to add the wrinkle of the Pythagorean theorem to that. So I look at x coordinates first. From 3 to negative 4, how far is that? It's 7. So not only am I just going to write 7, but I'm going to take the 7 and I'm going to square it, because we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. Right? So keep in mind what I'm doing here is I'm looking at this distance. That's a total of 7. We can picture that. So that side would be 7 squared for Pythagorean theorem. And then from negative 1 to 3, what's that? That's this distance here, to go from negative 1 to 3, and that's 4. So we square it. And Pythagorean theorem says to find that distance, that would be this length along here, we have to take the square root of those two sums, of that sum squared. So this is going to be the square root of 49 plus 16. And then we would want to take the square root of that. Okay, so 49 plus 16 is going to be 65. And generally we can leave that under the radical. I think on your quiz, the answer will be just left in radical form like that, square root of 65. Or we would get a decimal version of that. Okay, now let's go from E to S. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is, E is at negative 3, negative 4. And then where is S? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's at 4, 4. Okay, let me just double check those. 1, 2, 3. Yep. Negative 3, negative 4, 4, 4. So for the x coordinates, how far is this distance? Right? From negative 3 to positive 4, it's 7 squared again. Then we need to go from negative 4 to positive 4. That's going to be a distance of 8. We square both of those and we add them together. So I'd have 49 plus 64, and we will take the square root of that. So this is going to be the square root of 113. And again, we can leave it under the radical like that if you prefer. So now this time we don't have the graph in front of us, but we're doing the same thing. So in number 7, I want to look how far is it from negative 7 to 5. So think, to get from negative 7 to 0, that's 7, plus another 5, that's going to be a total of 12, and we square it. From 0 to 9, how far is that? It's just 9, and we square both of those. So we have 144 plus 81, and we're going to take the square root of that. 144 plus 81 is 225, and the square root of 225 is 15. Okay, let's try another one. How far is it from 1 to 4? That's going to be 3 units. All right, to move from 1 to 4 is 3, 3 squared, and then we've got from 3 to 6, another 3. So we have 3 squared plus 3 squared, 9 plus 9 is square root of 18, and we can just leave that under the radical. Later on, we'll learn how to reduce this. If you're into that, if you remember simplifying radicals, this is 3 square root of 2. But for now, I think your answers on your quiz will look just like that, square root of 18. Okay, so let's try number 9 and number 10 on our own, and we'll put our answers in the Ed puzzle. Okay, so for number 9, to get from negative 2 to 0, how far would that be? That should have been just 2. So we take the 2 and we square it. From 5 to negative 4, how long does it take to move that way? 9. So that's 9 squared. And then we take the square root, right? So we have 4 plus 81, and we're going to square root that, and that would be the square root of 85. And we'll just leave the answer under the radical for now. Let's not worry too much about how to simplify that. Negative 2 to 8, that's the first piece we have. That should be 10. You're at negative 2 to get to 0, that's 2, and then another 8 is a total of 10. Okay? From negative 1 to positive 3, always picture that number line, that's 4. We square them both, and we take the square root. So this is 100 plus 16, and we're going to take the square root of that. That would be the square root of 116. We can leave that under the radical. Next, we're moving on to midpoint. So first segment we have is r to t. This is even easier. Okay, if you got the distance formula down, I think this is much easier. In this, for midpoint, we just add the two numbers together and divide by 2. That takes us to the middle every time. So r, it lives at negative 2. T lives at 4. We're going to add those two together and just divide by 2. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Divide that by 2. This would be a midpoint of 1. So if we look at our graph here and we see where 1 lives, you can sort of see that 1 is basically halfway between r and t. We can see it's kind of right in the middle. You have a visual picture of it with the number line sitting there. Okay. Next one, same thing. We're going from q to r. So q is here at negative 6. R is at negative 2. And this is where I see most of the problems here, is adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers. Okay. Negative 6 plus negative 2, and you have the number line in front of you. Check your answer and make sure it seems reasonable. Negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8. If you came up with something different from that, oops, this is not divided by 4. It should be divided by 2. Sorry about that. If you came up with something different, negative 6 plus negative 2, we need to work on adding and subtracting integers. Okay, negative 6 plus negative 2 is negative 8, and then we always divide by 2. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And let's go ahead and take a look on our graph. Does that make sense? Here's where negative 4 is. Does he look like he lives right in the middle of Q and R? And indeed it does. The negative 4 looks like it's right in the middle of that. So you have the number line there in front of you to go ahead and check your answers each time. Okay, so let's try number 13 and number 14, and we'll put our answers in the Ed puzzle. Okay, so in number 13, we want to find the distance from S to T. Well, S lives at 1, T is at 4. Okay, so we're going to take 1 plus 4, and we will divide by 2. So this is 5 divided by 2, and this time we get a decimal, 2.5. And that's okay. We can have decimals. Okay, from P to R, let's see how we did with that one. To go from P, which is at negative 9, watch that negative symbol there, right? P is at negative 9, to R, which is at negative 2. It looks like we'll have another decimal here. Negative 9 plus negative 2. Be careful, that's negative 11. Negative 11 divided by 2 is negative 5.5. So this is why we reviewed our algebra stuff in the beginning of the course to make sure we were okay with those types of situations. So now 15 and 16, we just add a layer to this. We're just doing the same thing for midpoint. We just do it twice. Okay, I have to get an x-coordinate and I have to get a y-coordinate. So to get my x-coordinate, I add the two x-coordinates together, much like what we did with distance, except it's even easier. So I take -9 plus 5 and we divide that by 2. For the y-coordinate, we take 3 plus 7 and we divide by 2. So this is -4 divided by 2, and this is 10 divided by 2. So our midpoint would be, again, this is 2 points in space, so we need two coordinates, -2 and 5. Okay, try number 16 on your own and put the answer in our Ed puzzle. Okay, so hopefully we did this one correctly. We're going to get an x-coordinate by taking -12 plus -8 and dividing that by 2. And then the y-coordinate is going to be -7 plus -4, and we will divide that by 2. So -12 plus -8, be careful there, that's -20. Okay, -7 plus -4 is -11. Okay, they're both negative, so their sum is going to be a negative number. -20 divided by 2 is -10. -11 divided by 2, we did that right up here, is -5.5. Okay, and that is basically our quiz on Wednesday. It's going to be on Remote Wednesday. It's just distance and then midpoint. So distance is the Pythagorean theorem in disguise, and midpoint is just adding two numbers, dividing by 2. Keep it as simple as possible.